Welcome, I'm Michelle Renee Hiatt of American Quilter Society. Welcome to episode 4. In episode 4, we're going to cut down our trapezoids using a normal ruler. I'm going to choose my Quilter Select 6 by 12 inch ruler. It is perfect for this occasion, and just like the long rulers, it has the sticky back, which allows us perfect cutting. I will be also using my Quilter Select handle. You may have noticed that I'm not using the packaged products. I actually am using my beloved rulers. I love these Quilter Select. I use them every day in my sewing. But we're going to trim down our trapezoids, and then we're going to stitch them to the matching half square triangle and press them. And we're going to go through all 12 of each of our 11 fabrics to be able to be prepared for episode 5, where we're going to put our blocks together. But first, let's start by cutting down our trapezoids. All right, so we're going to take our trapezoids and we're going to lay them nice and flat. Let me actually start with the right-hander first. So we'll place that there. And these need to be 1 3/4 inches wide. So when we cut them apart, we left some extra of the trapezoid, and that's what we're actually going to trim. So I'm going to line up my 1 3/4, which is, remember, if you go to your 2 inches, you're just pulling back 1/4 inch and you're lining that up. This size ruler, the 6 by 12, allows us to have the trapezoid with the star points neatly underneath it. And then I'm just going to trim the exposed star points. All right? And that makes them nice and neat. Let me show you that again. I'm going to lay down my trapezoid, and I'm going to line up the edge with the 1 3/4, making sure it's nice and lined up. And if you need to futz with it a bit, you can. Looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and trim. All right, I'm going to continue doing that through all my trapezoids, but first, let me show the lefty. So you're going to line up your trapezoid extra points so that they're on the left-hand side. And we're going to line up the 1 3/4 on our ruler. Remember, that's 1/4 off of the 2. And then we're going to come in here and trim our extras. All right, so really easy peasy. Now this one, you may have noticed, is a little extra on the side. So first I'm going to trim the one side. You may find that you have some of them. So I'm going to line up the 1 3/4 all the way through the sides that matched up nicely. And I just want to make sure I'm keeping this straight. And I'm going to go ahead and trim. And then I'm going to just turn it around and then use my just cleaned edge, that's 1 3/4, to go ahead and line up to trim that extra that I have here. All right, easy peasy. I'm going to continue making my way through the remainder of my trapezoids for this fabric, right? I'll have 12 total, and then I'm going to repeat that for the remaining 10 fabrics. So 11 fabrics total, that you have 12 trapezoids to clean up. Next, we're going to go ahead and sew our trapezoids to our half square triangles. Now, for this pattern, as designed, you want to match your trapezoid to your half square triangle. You're going to see it as it should be sewn. You are sewing the smaller side of your trapezoid to that half square triangle. You kind of want it to look like a squished Christmas tree, right? So if you can picture it, you do not want to sew the wide part to your half square triangle. So it's very important that you lay it out this way. I like to visualize it. I'm a visual learner. I like to see it, flip it, and I'm going to split the difference. And by that I mean that you should have a little point of the half square triangle hanging out here, as well as here, and they should be pretty equal amount. This is oversized slightly, so there's a little wiggle room, but make sure you take the time to do so. If you are a pinner, you may want to pin, but it's not required. It depends on what you like to do. We're then going to come over here and sew, and I'm going to chain piece these. So I'm going to line up my first one, and you're lining up those edges. I'm going to come in and I'm sewing 1/4 inch, and I'm just taking the time to make sure that I'm keeping my edges lined up, keeping that trapezoid and those star points nicely lined up. Now when I get here, I'm going to remove my pin. You may have noticed that I pin with the pin on my fabric. It's much better than pinning so that the pin is sticking out from your fabric. If you have your pin in your fabric, it's going to make it much more stable. However, I don't want to run over pins, so at this point, I'm going to remove my pin and then continue sewing through. Making sure I'm keeping it nice and lined up. So I'm going to take my next one. I'm just going to move this stack over here a little closer to me. I'm going to see it, flip it, and I'm going to split the difference, making sure I have equal amounts of extra there. And then I'm going to come in and stitch my next unit. And if you want to go ahead and pin, you can. And I'm going to continue sewing through. You want to make sure that your machine is doing the work here and pulling it through. You have a bunch of exposed bias and you don't want to stretch it. So let your machine pull the fabric through. You shouldn't be pulling it through. All right, and then I'm going to just continue on through all of my trapezoids and half square triangles, matching them up. I have 12 of each of my fabrics. See it, flip it, split the difference, and stitch it. You may have noticed when you flip over your trapezoid that your seams are pressed towards you, which will help when you're stitching them so that you don't turn them over and get twisted sisters. Next, we're going to move on to pressing these. Once you have 12 of them for each of your 11 fabrics. I've moved these over to my pressing station, and you may have noticed I've kept them chain pieced. This actually helps us by having that extra weight on our strips as we're pressing them. It helps keep the rest of it down. So I'm going to set my seam and then finger press and press. And remember, it's really important when you have exposed bias, which we have on both of these fabrics, to make sure that we are finger pressing so that we don't distort, right? We took all this time to cut straight, sew straight, and now we don't want to ruin that by not pressing properly. So I'm going to go ahead and set the seam. And then I'm going to finger press. Then press. I'm going to give it a little hit of steam with the Rowenta, getting it nice and flat. And then to give it a nice finish, I'm going to take Faultless's Magic Spray and give it a nice mist. We want to get this nice and flat. In our episode 5, we're going to be mixing and matching and putting these together. So it's really important that I give these this nice hit of the magic spray to make sure that they stay nice and flat until I get all of my units done. All right, I'm just going to continue making my way through the strip. You want to be very careful with those trapezoids. Remember, press, finger press, and then we're going to press. Never shove the fabric with the iron. A hot iron can distort a lot. All right? And I love the fact that the Rowenta only steams on demand. I'm never worried about having my hand in a place that it can get burned. All right, just a nice mist. Give it that nice finish. And this is going to keep them nice and flat as I finish with the piecing of all of my units. All right, set that seam, finger press. You'll notice that they're not lifting off the mat, they're staying down. That's in part to the weight here holding them down. Next, faultless. Little steam, they're nice and finished. And now I need to cut them apart so that they're ready for our next step. And I'm going to keep them nice and flat so they're stored so that they'll be ready for our next step. I'm just going to continue making my way through all of my 11 fabrics. And you should have 12 of each of these. And as you're pressing them, you definitely want to make sure that you have that little squished Christmas tree. You want to make Christmas trees and not sailboats. I'm going to cut them apart. Just going to offset that a little. Again, keeping them in a nice, neat stack. As you get to your last couple, they're not going to have the weight of the rest of the strip. So you're just going to have to be careful when you press that you're getting it pressed appropriately. I kind of hold down my last one because I don't have the weight of the next unit. And then finger press and press. I'll hit a mist. And trim them apart. Now, while I've done 2 here on camera for you, you are going to want to go through all 11 fabrics. Before we put these together in episode 5, you want to make sure that you have enough to balance the color throughout your quilt. So this wraps up episode 4. I can't wait to see you for episode 5, where we get to put these together to form our blocks. And next, we'll be laying out our quilt.